Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehitatef b'tzitzit. Blessed are you, Lord our God, everlasting King, who sets us apart by your establishments and establishes for us to put on the tzitzit. Together, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. How lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. I come into your holy house and bow toward your holy sanctuary in awe of you. Lord, I love your house where you dwell, the place where your glory sits. I prostrate myself and bow. I kneel before the Lord, my Maker. In your great kindness, answer me with the truth of your salvation. For Yeshua, your Messiah, is truth and the answer to all that we seek on your holy Shabbat. Baruch et Adonai hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai hamvorach le'olam va'ed.
Bless the Lord who is to be blessed.
Bless the Lord who is blessed everlasting.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod, Malchuto, Le'olam Vayed. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Blessed be the name of his glorious kingdom, everlasting. Va'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'kol lavavcha uv'kol nafshecha uv'kol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavacha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'beitecha uvlechtecha v'aderech uvshachtecha uvkumecha ukshartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot bein einecha uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvish arecha. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And these words that I set up for you today shall be on your heart, and you shall teach them repeatedly to your children. You shall speak of them when you sit in your house, when you walk in the way, when you lie down, and when you arise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand and as bands between your eyes, and you shall write them on your doorposts of your house and in your gates. Hodu la'Adonai kir'u vishmo, hodi'u va'amima lihilotav, shiru lo zamru lo sichu b'kol niflotav, hithalelu b'shem kadsho, yismach lev mavakshe Adonai.
Give thanks to the Lord, call upon his name, make known his deeds among the peoples. Sing to him, sing praises to him, speak of all his wonders, glory in his holy name. Let the heart of those who seek the Lord be glad.
Seek the Lord and his strength. Seek his face continually. Remember all his wonderful deeds that he has done, his wonders and the judgments from his mouth. Zerah Yisrael Avdo, Bnei Yaakov Bechirav. Seed of Israel, his servant, sons of Jacob, his chosen ones.
He is the Lord our God, his judgments in all the earth, the word he established to 1,000 generations, the covenant he made with Abraham and his oath to Isaac. He confirmed it to Jacob for a statute, to Israel as an everlasting covenant. Hodu la'Adonai
Kito, ki leolam chasto. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His mercy is everlasting. Adonai Hoshia HaMelech Ya'anenu. Bayom Kar'enu, Hoshia et Amecha, Uvarech et Nachaletecha, Urem, V'nasem ad ha'olam. Lord, save us.
May
May the King answer us in the day we call. Save your people and bless your inheritance. Tend them and care for them forever. Ashrei ha'am shekacha lo. Ashrei ha'am she'Adonai Elohav. Happy is the people whose lot is thus. Happy is the people whose God is the Lord.
You've shaken the land and torn it open, and its fractured floor she quakes, giving a banner to those who fear you to be, unfurled against the foe they make. Save us and help us with your right hand, that all your beloved may be saved and stand. God has spoken in his holiness, Elohim the Berkat show. Oh God, go forth now with our armies, give us help against the enemies, for deliverance by man is useless. Through God we shall do valiantly, and we know that it is he who treads down our enemies. Hoshea Yamin, save with your right hand. Hoshea Yamin, save with your right hand. Shechem, measure the valley, Gilad is mine, Menashe my land, Ephraim the helmet of my head in battle, Judah scepter I hold in my hand. Save us and help us with your right hand, that all your beloved may be saved and stand. God has spoken in his holiness, Elohim the Berkat show. Oh God, go forth now with our armies, give us help against the enemy, for deliverance by man is useless. Through God we shall do valiantly, and we know that it is he who treads down our enemies. Hoshea Yamincha, save with your right hand. Hoshea Yamincha, save with your right hand. God, go forth now with our armies, give us help against our enemies. Through God we shall do valiantly, and we know that it is he who treads down our enemies. Hoshea Yamincha, save with your right hand. Hoshea Yamincha, save with your right hand. Hoshea Yamincha, save with your right hand. In that day the Lord shall be one, his name shall be one, his people are one. On Zion again your temple will stand, you'll rule all the nations with your wisdom and power. Again, in that day the Lord shall be one, his name, his people are one. On Zion again your temple will stand, you'll rule all the nations with your wisdom and power. Kila Adonai Hamlucha, Kila Adonai Hamlucha, V'heitel Adonai Hamlucha, V'heitel Adonai Hamlucha. The kingdom is the Lord's, and the kingdom shall be the Lord's. Your glory will fill all the earth. Baruch Shem Kibor Malchuto Le'olam Vayed. Your kingdom will fill all the earth.
Arise, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered. Lord, it's your day. You set apart Shabbat as your day. You have a plan. You have a purpose for everybody. All those who seek your face, all those who are called by your name, all those who know your name. Blessed are you, Lord our God, everlasting King, for you have made us to be Yodei Shmecha, knowers of your name, Ulamdei Toratcha Lishma, and students of your Torah for its own sake. Baruch atah Adonai hamlamed Torah l'amo Yisrael. Blessed are you, Lord, who teaches Torah to his people Israel. You may be seated. Shabbat Shuvah, that means the Sabbath of Return, Sabbath of Repentance. And usually on Shabbat Shuvah, the rabbi gives a long sermon or teaching. Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm glad you're okay with that. Only a quarter of the people are okay with that. But I don't have a real long teaching. However, I do have the biggest chunk of doctrine or teaching that is taught on Shabbat Shuvah. We're going to study the same thing the Jews have been studying all over the world today and are studying all over the world today. And it's all about, believe it or not, the greatest thing in the world. Guess what it is? The birth pangs in the kingdom. The birth pangs in the kingdom. Isn't that strange? So a couple of little announcements. First of all, the bathrooms are straight back the hallway to the left. Number two, please, where is the basket for giving? Okay, the basket's back on near the entrance on that podium. And then we're 5 days away from Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, I'd encourage you to take it off if you can. We fast. That means no water, no food for 24 hours straight. So from sundown Wednesday to sundown Thursday. You'll have to check me on the day.
Right.
Okay, sundown Wednesday to sundown Thursday. Now we're going to have two services on that Thursday. We're not having an Erev Wednesday night. We're having a 11 o'clock Torah study for the book of Jonah. We're going to study the book of Jonah on 11 o'clock on Yom Kippur day, on Thursday. And then we're going to have Ne'ilah. Ne'ilah means the closing of the gates. And that's the final service of Yom Kippur. I believe it's at 6:30. It's on the website. The services are listed on the website, by the way. I believe it's 6:30 on that Thursday afternoon, Thursday night. And then we're going to break the fast afterwards. Okay, let's stand for the Ketavniot. That's what we'll call this prayer, the Ketavniot, because that's what it says, and that's the most important word in the prayer, Ketavniot. Like picture, as pictures, Ketavniot. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan et kol darkav, lamo Yisrael ketavniot, lekol hadevarim, shebashamayim. Climbing to heaven on that last word. Blessed are you, Lord our God, everlasting King, who has given all of his ways to his people Israel as pictures of all heavenly things. You may be seated. All heavenly things, every single spiritual thing, without exception, was given to Israel in picture form. Not literally, but in picture form or metaphor. Now this Torah portion that we're in this week, Vayelech, and he went, from Deuteronomy Chapter 31. Hey, by the way, thank you for giving me the suggestion to lift the screen. Can you see it okay? Yeah. Good. So we lifted the screen a little bit. That worked out perfectly. I hope you all can see it. So in this Torah portion of Devarim, or Deuteronomy 31, it's a very short Torah portion. But most of it is this, what I've got written here. Most of it is about a prophecy of the last day. I've only got obviously a part of the Torah portion here, even though it's a short Torah portion, but most of that Torah portion is about this subject. So this is what we're going to look at today. So we're going to be in chapter 31. We're going to read verse 2, verse 16 through 18, and then 28 through 29. He said to them, "Today I am 120 years old." You know what that means? That means it was his birthday. Yes. Now we're at the end of Devarim, which means the day he died. So the last 4 chapters of Devarim are all said on the day he died. And then he went and he died. So these are his last words, part of his last words. "Today I'm 120 years old. I can no longer go or come, and the Lord said to me, you shall not cross this Jordan." The Lord said to Moshe, "Behold, you are to lie with your fathers, and this nation will rise up and stray after other gods of the Gentiles." In other words, they're going to become un-Jewish. They're going to become like not Jews. And it doesn't mean paganism. Picture something closer to home. They're going to give up their Jewish ways and take on the ways of all the Gentiles, idolatry, but specifically, coming shortly, the explosion of Hellenism, the way of the Greek, which is the typical standardized things of what is now in the church system, the system of the church. It's throughout. It's from one end to the other in the church system. But that is going to be just coating, completely filling, and taking over the people he's talking to, the Jews. Now think about that. And this is coming. This is a prophecy of the future, which is very shortly to come. "Behold, you're going to lie," God says to Moshe, "you're going to lie with your fathers, and after you die, this nation will rise up and stray after other gods of the Gentiles." Okay, in his time, that's fine. "And they will forsake me, break my covenant I made with them, and my fury will rage against them in that day." Say, "Bayom Hahu." Say, "Bayom Hahu." So, we say that prayer at the end of the service, Aleinu, Bayom Hahu, Bayom Hahu, in that day. It is not just like off in the future. It is a very specific day. I'm going to show you the words from the Talmud that give us this understanding. Just one passage in the Talmud that gives us this understanding that that day is a specific day. Bayom Hahu. And he says it 3 times in this passage. "My fury will rage against them in that day, and I will abandon them and hide my face from them, and they will be consumed, and many evils and troubles will befall them. And they will say in that day, Bayom Hahu, is it not because our God is no longer in my midst that these evils have come up, fallen on me? And I will hide my face, Bayom Hahu, in that day." That's 3 times. "Because of all the evil they committed, for they turned to other gods." This is not talking about right after Moshe dies. It's talking about Bayom Hahu. Well, when is Bayom Hahu? In that day, in the day of the Lord, which we're going to look at. So this is, think about this. Think about this. Very shortly in the future, Israel is going to serve other gods. That may not freak you out, but it freaks me out. Well, what other gods on the earth are to the worship? Christ? No, there's not a lot of them now. All the gods of the world, except for a couple, which is the animism gods, like your fathers, your mothers as God from the islands, Southeast Islands and stuff like that. All the gods of the world are coming together into one God. It's called ecumenicalism, where all the gods merge into one world religion. That world religion looks like, for the most part, a watered-down form of Christianity. Jews are going to be absorbed with this, not Gentiles. And this makes God madder than anything on the planet. The question is, you can water down Christianity? Yeah, you can. You can gut it of all of its essentials. All of its essentials. Yes. But it still looks the same. It still has the same words, looks the same rituals, but it's gutted of all of its essentials. It's a good question, though. So then he says, I want you to read that last part again. For they turned, past tense, to other gods. They turned to other gods. And he's speaking from the future. He's speaking from in that day, by Yom Hahu. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So he's in the future saying, back a little while ago, they turned to other gods. Now, I don't know if you've spent any time thinking about this. This is not talking about, gods of wood and stone like the Canaanites.
No.
This is talking about the future, not the past. What gods are there to worship now that are not the Jewish God? I know that after my death you will surely become corrupted. This is Moshe talking now. I know that after my death you will surely become corrupted and deviate from the way, the derech, which I established for you. Consequently, the evil will befall you at the end of days. Now, believers love to use this phrase, end of days. It's acharit yamim. But what they don't usually or typically do is merge end of days with day of the Lord. One day. But it's the same thing. They're synonyms. They're both phrases for the day of the Lord. Acharit yamim, last days or end of days, and Bayom Hahu, in that day. Same thing. So that's 4 times now he said it. In that day, in that day, in that day, end of days. Ketz Yamim, end of days. Because you did evil in the eyes of the Lord, to provoke him to anger through the work of your hands. The work of your hands. And he's talking about the future, which hasn't even come yet. I want you to think about that. So this is what we're going to look at first, his 120 years. This is an amazing picture. Moshe's 120 years. If you've never seen this, it's awesome. It's really simple and beautiful and amazing. So it says in Deuteronomy 34, a couple chapters later, although Moshe was 120 years old when he died, how old was he? How old was he? 120. His eyesight was not dim. Now what it says in Hebrew is, nor his moisture dried up. They translated his vigor abated or something like that. But in Hebrew it says his moisture was not dried up. You know what that's talking about? That's talking about he could still have kids. At the age of 120. All the rabbis say that, by the way, not my words. So the sons of Israel wept for Moshe in the plains of Moab for 30 days. Then the days of weeping and mourning for Moshe came to an end. And then they moved on, Joshua took over, and they went into the what? They went into the what? Into the kingdom, into the day. Remember, Joshua didn't give them a land, he gave them another day. So, I say Adar 7 is when he died, because that's what the rabbis say. But I'm giving you the verses here so you can prove it. I'm going to prove it to you. Adar 7 plus 30 days brings us to Nisan 7. That's the first month in the Jewish calendar. Joshua 2, 1 and verse 22 says, Joshua ben Nun sent 2 men secretly from Shittim. Now Shittim is in the middle of the land of Israel. So they've already gotten to the middle of the land. 2 men secretly from Shittim. So where is Israel? They're in the middle of the land. They're in Shittim. He sends them from Shittim all the way back to near the Jordan to Jericho, saying, go view the land, especially Jericho. So they departed and came to the hill country and remained there for 3 days. Now these are I'll call them spies so you can know what I'm saying. They're not spies, they're tourists, but that's okay. I'll call them spies. So he sends the spies from Shittim back to Jericho to check the whole land. They end up in Jericho. And then, after the story about what they did in Jericho, it says they returned, crossed over, and came to Joshua, son of Nun. Where is Joshua, son of Nun?
Jericho.
No.
No.
Shittim.
Oh, yeah, Shittim.
You got lost. So all of Israel is at Shittim. Yes?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. He sends 2 guys from Shittim back to Jericho, near the Jordan. They check it out, and they're there for 3 days. They're like wandering around. They escape from Jericho, and they're just wandering around, hiding out for 3 days. Then they go back to Joshua. Where is Joshua? Shittim. That's what, we would think, right? Except there's another story right after that tells us that Joshua moved on. So we have Nisan 7, because we have the 30 days of mourning for Moshe, from Adar 7 to Nisan 7. Then we have the 3 days that these guys are wandering around, plus 3 days brings us to Nisan 10. Yes?
Yeah.
Nisan 10. But now there's another story. So I put, meanwhile, Joshua chapter 3 happens. Joshua got up early in the morning, and Israel set out from Shittim. They leave Shittim. Okay? And they came to the Jordan, and they spent the night there before they crossed. Then at the end of 3 days, these 3 days are the same 3 days that the dudes were wandering around, the spies were wandering around in the desert. Yet they happened at the same time. That's why I put meanwhile. So we have 3 days that the guys are wandering around are the same 3 days that they waited until they crossed the Jordan. Make sense? So they happen at the same time. At the end of 3 days, the officers went through the midst of the camp. Okay, so we got the 3 guys, the 3 spies. They go back to Joshua. Where is Joshua? Where is Joshua?
He's by the Jordan.
He's by the Jordan. So they got there just in time for Israel to cross through the Jordan. 3 days? 3 days. Same time. And they showed up, and Joshua says, okay, we're going to cross through the Jordan. And the spies were able to go with them. So that's why I put meanwhile.
How far
So-
is the Jordan from Shittim?
I'm not sure. I think 20 miles, but I'm not sure. Then at the end of 3 days, the officers went through the midst of the camp, saying, when you see the Ark of the Covenant, you shall set out from your place and go after it and cross the Jordan. Okay? So what's the date?
Nisan 10.
What's the date? What's the date? Nisan 10. Adar 7 plus 30 days is Nisan 7 plus 3 days, Nisan 10. Okay? And they crossed through the Jordan on Nisan 10. Joshua 4:19, it says that. Now the people came up from the Jordan on the 10th of the first month, Nisan, and camped at Gilgal on the eastern edge of Jericho. All right. So this proves to us that Moshe was born and died on Adar 7.
Yeah.
And there's the proof for you. Now this fact that he lived 120 years exactly to the day is an absolutely amazing picture. What do you think it's a picture of? Just take a guess. The only thing I ever teach about. The kingdom, the day of the Lord. The Lord said in Genesis 6 this, my spirit will not remain with man forever, because he is flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. What a crock. God's full of it. This was written by somebody who was asleep or dead. That when he said this in Genesis 6, you know how long Noah lived? Do you know? No, 600 years. You know how long Methuselah lived? 969 years. That's when this was said. There was no people living 120 years. They lived 600, 500, 400, 300 years. Nobody lived 120 until Moses. It steadily dropped and dropped and dropped until it got to Moshe. And Moshe was the first one that it's recorded that he lived exactly 120 years. So what I'm saying is, God said man's limit, his stop, is 120 years. The only person recorded to do that is the perfect man, Moshe, the perfect man. About Moshe, it is said he was the most humble man on earth. There's another passage that says, I'm going to do this stuff so all of Israel will believe in you and exalt you forever. If you don't have that in your heart with Moshe, you don't have God's heart. And remember, Moshe is a picture synonymous with the Torah, right? He's the perfect man. He gave us the Torah. He's a picture of the Messiah, the best picture we have of the Messiah, which is synonymous with the Torah. So if you don't love this guy for giving us the Torah, you don't have God's heart. You just don't. That's God's heart. God created this guy, made everything about him to be in the Bible so we can know him, so we can know God. So you need to cherish Moshe. And I'm saying that for a reason, because I know most of you don't. Most of you cherish Jesus, Yeshua, but you don't cherish Moshe on equal footing, and you need to. Because in the scriptures, he is on equal footing with the Messiah. Now, you may not like those words, but that's how it is in the scriptures. He is on equal footing with the Messiah. He's the best picture we have of Yeshua in the Bible. Better than David. Lest you think David is the best. Better than David. He's the best thing we've got to look at to understand the Messiah. So, God created his life and stopped it on his birthday at the age of 120. Now, there's something else here, too. How long is a Jubilee? How long is a Jubilee?
50 years.
Yeah, 50 years. 50 years. So, the whole limit of man, like all of mankind, has how long to be on the earth? 6,000 years. Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, and then comes God's day. That's not our day. That's God's day. That's why it's called the day of the Lord. Or else it would say the day of Eileen, the day of Michael, the day of your name. It's not. It's God's day. It doesn't belong to us. It belongs to him. But the first 6 days he has given to man. That's ours. How long is it?
6,000 years.
How long is it? For 6 days? Right. 6,000 years. That's how long he gave us. Well, how many Jubilees is that? 120. So Moshe, being the perfect lifespan, is a picture of all of mankind's lifespan. So don't read it 120 years, read it 120 Jubilees for all of man. 120 times 50 is 6,000. And then comes the day of the Lord. Make sense?
Yeah.
Now, I just think this is an amazing picture. And it gets better. Joshua 2:1-2. Joshua sent 2 men secretly from Shittim, go view the land, especially Jericho. So they departed and they came to the hill country and remained there for 3 days. They returned, crossover. I have this just to remind you that brought us to Nisan 10. If you work backwards from that, it brings you to Adar 7. Moshe's birthday and Moshe's death day. So the reason I have this scripture here is because I want you to see that God manipulated and created these days. He made him born on Adar 7. He made him die on Adar 7. He made Joshua bring the people over on Nisan 10. This was all planned by God so that we could have this picture to see. And it gets better. Before you look at this, look at me. Don't look at this yet. Look at me. Moshe lived 120 years, right? Yeah. How long was the first chunk of his life? How long did he live before he heard God?
40 years.
Very good. 40 years. He was 40 years old when he heard God the first time. Then he was 40 years with Israel in the wilderness, right? Led him out of Egypt. 40 years in the desert, yes? Yeah. So that second chunk is how long? 80. No, how long was the second chunk itself? 40 years, right? So you got the first chunk, 40 years. You got the second chunk, 40 years. And then 40 years after that. 40 years after that. So there's 3 chunks. There's 3 chunks of his life. 40, and then 80, and they led Israel out. They were in the wilderness 40 years, and that's another 40 years, 120. 40, 40, and 40. So not only is his life a perfect picture of the 6,000 years, his life is divided in 3. Now look at what the rabbis say about these 6,000 years divided into 3 chunks, just like Moshe's life. Rav Katina says 6,000 years is the duration of the world. These are not my words. I'm teaching you this because it's what Judaism teaches. 6,000 years is the duration of the world. And it is in rest or fallow for 1,000 years. That's God's day. That's the kingdom. It's Shabbat. The duration of the period during which the world is in rest is derived from a verse, as it is stated, and the Lord alone shall be exalted by Yom Ha-Hu, in that day. And the day of God lasts 1,000 years. There it is, in black and white. Yeah. Not my words. That's in the Talmud. The day of God lasts 1,000 years. Did you know the Talmud said that? So clearly? I did not. Okay, that's the kingdom. Now, what about the 6,000 years? The school of Eliyahu taught 6,000 years is the duration of the world. 2,000 of the 6,000 years are characterized by chaos. That's the way of the Gentile. So, just think the Gentiles are ruling the earth. Just chaos. Total and complete tohu, which means confusion or chaos. That's the way of the Gentile. That's what most of us have known all our life. Total chaos. And that was from creation, actually from the fall of Adam and Chava, up until the year 2000 in the biblical calendar. That's during the life of Abraham, by the way, the year 2000. And then it says 2,000 years are characterized by Torah. So from Abraham until, what year is it at the end of the Torah period? What year is it?
4,000.
What is it?
4,000.
Right. At the end of the Torah period is the year 4,000. That's the year Yeshua died. So from Abraham, who did the Torah, who did Judaism, until Yeshua died and was resurrected, is called the time of Torah.
In the Talmud.
In the Talmud, yes. Did you know? Isn't that a trip? It just freaks me out. It's amazing. Yes.
So, first question,
I can't hear you.
how many days do we have left
How many days do we have
for
left?
the 6,000?
We're not talking about that right now. That may come up in about 3 slides. We'll see. Okay, so we have from creation to Abraham is called what?
Chaos.
Come on, guys. It's called what?
Chaos.
I want to hear somebody other than Doug, please. It's called what? Chaos or tohu. From Abraham to Yeshua's death, burial, and resurrection is called the time of what? Torah. Now that is all of biblical history, by the way. That's all of biblical history, that 2,000-year period. Everything that's recorded in the Bible is in that period, in the Old Testament, what they call the Old Testament, in the Tanakh. Then it says, and 2,000 years are the period of Messiah. It says that in the Talmud. So from the death, burial, and resurrection until the day of the Lord is called the church age. That's where they get that from. That's why they call it the church age. Because it's the time of Messiah, when the body of Messiah spreads throughout the whole earth. What they call the church. But it's the time of Messiah. We're not in the time of Messiah in the day of the Lord. We're in the time of Messiah in the last 2,000 years. Right now. Does that make sense? Yeah. Now that's from the Talmud. I think that's pretty amazing. So, here's, on the bottom you can see the scriptures that tell us about Moshe's 3 chunks of his life. From Acts chapter 7, verse 30, it says that at the age of 40, he saw the burning bush. And then the second 40 years, Exodus 7:7 says that he was 40 years with Israel in the wilderness. Sorry, it says that 40 years later, I messed that up earlier too, that 40 years later, he went to redeem Israel. So it's 40 years, his first 40 years, he sees the burning bush, and then the second 40 years, he's 80 when he goes to redeem Israel, and then his third 40 years, says in Deuteronomy 34, verse 7, like we read, 120 years. Make sense? Does that make sense? Okay, so you have 3 chunks of Moshe's life. The first one is chaos. First one's chaos. 40 years in chaos, in nothing. He didn't know who he was. He didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know what he was supposed to do. He was just some schluff in Egypt, and then he fled to Midian. He just didn't know what he was doing. 40 years of chaos. And then 40 years of Torah. So at the age of 80, he goes and redeems Israel, right? And 40 years where he's giving them the Torah. Isn't that amazing? It took 40 years for him to give the Torah in the wilderness. And then the last 40 years, and he comes to the end of his life, and he dies. All right. So I think that's pretty amazing. And then comes the kingdom. Okay, back to the prophecy. My anger will rage against them in that day, Bayom Hahu, and I will abandon them and hide my face from them, and they will be consumed in many evils and troubles. Many evils and troubles will befall them, and they will say in that day, is it not because our God is no longer in my midst that these evils have come upon me? And I will hide my face in that day, Bayom Hahu. Now, what's going to rise up in God is called af, anger. There's many words for anger in the Tanakh. This one is af, and it means the nose. You know when you feel anger in your nose and it gets all clogged, or it gets like wide open, either one, you can feel that anger in your nose, that's af. And your nose flares because you're angry, that's af. Deuteronomy 32, they have made me jealous with what is not God. I'm going to say this as clearly as I can say it. This is Jews following Jesus Christ. This is not Jews knowing the Messiah of Israel, Yeshua. This is Jews following, believing in, loving, and worshiping the Hellenistic Jesus Christ, the false Messiah. Not Yeshua, Jesus Christ. They made me jealous with what is not God. They provoked me to anger with their idols. Just picture a crucifix with Christ hanging on the cross. That's an idol. It doesn't matter how you cut it. It's an idol. It just is. For a fire has flared in my anger. So he said anger twice there. And it burns to the lowest part of hell and devours the earth with its yield and sets on fire the foundations of the mountains. I will add misfortunes to them. I will use up my arrows on them. On who? Who's he talking about? On who? Who's he going to do this to? Israel. This is Israel. This is a continuing prophecy in chapter 32 against Israel. By the way, this is part of a song. This is supposed to be sung. La la la, I'm going to pour out my anger and slaughter all of Israel. It's a song. In fact, it's a song that God says, Moshe, I want you to teach this song to Israel so they can teach it to their kids so that in the day of the Lord it's a witness against them. Isn't that a trip? Yeah. I will use up my arrows on them, wasted by famine, emaciated by plague, and a bitter epidemic, and the teeth of beasts I will send against them, and the venom of crawling things. And this is horrible. This is like the Holocaust. Because it is like the Holocaust, times 2. Now, we're talking about the word af, anger. And I'm saying that this is bayom hahu, bayom hahu, bayom hahu, and then in the end of days. 4 times he says it. Isaiah 13, look how it starts in verse 6. Wail for the what? Day of the Lord. Bayom hahu. Wail for bayom hahu, the day of the Lord, Yom Adonai is at hand. It will come as destruction from the Almighty. Therefore all hands will be faint, and every man's heart will melt, and they will be afraid. Pangs and sorrows will take hold of them. They'll be in pain as a woman in labor. In labor. They'll be amazed at one another, their faces on fire. Behold, the day of the Lord comes, cruel both with wrath and fierce anger. To lay the land desolate, he will destroy the sinners from it. For the stars of heaven will not give their light, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not shine her light. I will make a man more precious than fine gold. I will shake the heavens, and the earth will move out of her place in the wrath of the Lord of hosts, and in the day of his fierce anger. We've got a lot of adjectives to describe this horrible time, but the biggest one is like a woman in labor. And that's what we're going to look at. Isaiah 54:7 says this. Now here, see this thing in red? Hide my face. Hide my face. That is when God is going to hide his face from you. You think God has hidden his face from Israel during the Holocaust? No. During the Inquisition? No. During being kicked out of Spain and France and England and South America and Mexico? No. God never has turned his face away from Israel. But he's going to do it in the birth pangs for a very short period of time, 7 years. And then they will be born again. Actually, that's not even true. Even shorter than that, 3.5 years. And then Israel will be born again. Yes?
Then who gets taken up to the wedding during...
All the believers get taken up to the wedding.
Israel doesn't.
No, Israel does not if they don't know God.
All the believers of this.
All those who believe in God and believe in Messiah and have faith in the Messiah and the kingdom, coming kingdom, will be taken in the resurrection. And everybody else will be left. It's not our... what you're trying to do is get me to make a judgment of who's going to be taking the resurrection. I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot Polish person. Isaiah 54. For a brief moment I abandoned you. For a brief moment I abandoned you. Listen. This is talking about the birth pangs when God when he hides his face from Israel. For a brief moment, 3.5 years, I abandoned you, but with great compassion I will gather you. In an outburst of anger, I hid my face. Same exact words. In an outburst of af. I felt it in my nose. I was so mad. And I turned my face from you, and I let every horrible thing happen to you, and you repented. And then I turned to you in compassion with, look what it says, everlasting grace. Isn't that amazing? Everlasting grace. That means grace forever. Permanent, right. Everlasting grace. He's going to do that for Israel. But only after he disciplines them first. I will have compassion on you, says the Lord your Redeemer. For this is like, look what it says. This is like the days of Noah to me, when I swore that the waters of Noah would not flood the earth. Doesn't that sound kind of misplaced? Like, what's that doing there? Good, I'm glad it doesn't. That's good. For some people it does. Why is that there? Because that was a picture of the birth pangs. Right. The flood of Noah was a picture of the birth pangs. It's going to happen again. Only, he says, I'll never do it by water. I'm going to do it with fire. Now, during the Aharonic blessing, we say, Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha. The Lord bless you and keep you. But then the second and the third phrase say this, Ye'er Adonai panav alecha v'chuneka. The Lord make his face shine on you and give you grace. So there's going to be a very short period of time where Israel doesn't get that anymore. But a very short period of time. And then the third one, Yisa Adonai. Yisa means to lift up, raise up. Adonai panav, his face to you. V'yasem lecha shalom, and give you peace. So for a very short period, 3.5 years, there will be no Aharonic blessing on Israel. And then they all repent, they turn to the Messiah, they are saved en masse as a nation, and then God shows them chen olam, everlasting grace. Back to the birth pangs. Yes?
What does hide my face mean?
Hide my face literally means you don't get to see my face. My face, everything that entails. I mean, just think of a person. If I hide my face from you, I'm not listening to you, I can't see you, you can't see me, you can't talk to me, I don't care about you, I don't want to hear you, I don't want to know you. Like all that, all that entails. To ignore you. I will completely ignore you. It's horrible. Okay, back to the birth pangs. See that in red? Many evils and troubles. You've heard this phrase 1,000,000 times in the church. The Great Tribulation. That's what that says. Yeah. Many evils and troubles. It's a direct quote. I'm going to show you. I'm going to show it to you on the next slide. It's a direct quote of what Yeshua said. There's no such thing as the Great Tribulation. There's that. Many evils and troubles. So in Hebrew it says ra'ot, rabot, v'tzarot. Ra'ot means bad things or evils. Rabot means a lot of them. V'tzarot. Say the word tsar. 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 Like a TZ sound. Tsar. Tsar means trouble. It means birth pangs. It means tribulation. It means any word like that. It means pressure also. So it says there's going to be a lot, evils, great, and tribulations. Ra'ot, evils, rabot, great or many, v'tzarot, and tribulation. So ravot V'tzarot is great tribulation. That's what that is. There's no such thing as the Great Tribulation. There's just Ravot v'tzarot. Great tribulations. Make sense? But people who don't know Hebrew mistranslate the words of Messiah because they don't know he's speaking Hebrew and they don't have his words in Hebrew. So it's hard. So we end up saying wrong things. So now we're going to talk about two words. Two words. One of them is here. It's sorrow. Have you ever heard Jews, I don't know if you've been around Jews enough to even hear this, but have you ever heard Jews go, no, I got so much tsuris. Oh my God, the tsuris. That's the word sarot. Sarot. Only it's in Ashkenazic, so you put an S for a T. Sares. Sarot. Sares. Tsuris. I got such problems, such tribulations. Such tribulations I got. Such tsuris. That's what they're saying. Why? Because it's all over the Bible, the word sarot. I'm going to show you some. And every one of them means birth pains. Every one of them. Isaiah 13. Wail, for the day of the Lord is at hand. It will come as destruction from the Almighty. Therefore, all hands will be faint, every man's heart will melt, and they will be afraid. Pangs, tzirim, that's the word tsar, tzirim, plural, and sorrows. Now, this is another word you need to know, havelim. So up in the blue box, it says tsar and chevle. You need to know these words. Did you ever see that movie, The Chosen, with Rabbi Benson? He plays a Hasidic Jew, and then there's another guy who plays an Orthodox Jew, and the Hasidic Jew, they're playing baseball. The Orthodox Jews and the Hasidic Jews are playing baseball together because it's during the war, and they actually mix together, which they would never do before that. They hated the Orthodox, the Hasidic Jews. They thought they were horrible, horrible people who didn't even know God. Yeah. Huge, huge strife between the two. But they're playing baseball, and Robbie Benson, he's up to bat, and the other kid, the Orthodox kid, is pitching. Robbie Benson, the Hasidic boy, he hits that ball right at the guy's eye to put his eye out. And he does it on purpose. And so the whole story is about the Orthodox boy and the Hasidic boy coming together and how they come together. Well, there's one scene in this movie where the old Rebbe, the Hasidic boy's father, the Rebbe, he's got tens of thousands of followers, and he's with his little boy. He's got a little boy, and he's there on the bed, and he's, clapping his hands with him, telling him stories, and singing a little song so he can go to bed at night and sleep. And the song he sings is, Chevle HaMashiach, Chevle HaMashiach. You know what he's saying? Birth pangs of Messiah. That's what he's saying. Chevle is birth pangs. I'm going to show you. Specifically birth pangs. And that's what he's singing to his little boy to put him to sleep at night. Oh, Daddy, thank you so much. The birth pangs of Messiah, when all the Jews will die. It's crazy. Because it's so important to the Jewish people to understand these doctrines. It's crazy, isn't it? Isaiah 13 says, pangs, tzirim, and sorrows, havelim, from the word chevle, plural, will take hold of them like a woman in labor. Now, if you talk to 90% of Messianic Jews, they don't know what the birth pangs are. And yet there's so many verses about it. I'm going to show you them. Isaiah 21, a harsh vision has been shown to me. For this reason, my loins are full of anguish. Tzirim, pangs have seized me like the katsiri, like pangs of a woman in labor. Says it twice. Of a woman in labor. Now, do you have any doubt that sar means birth pangs? We've only looked at two verses, and we've already got three confirming witnesses that say tsar means birth pangs. But there's more. Isaiah 26. O Lord, they sought you in tribulation, in birth pangs, but tsar. They could only whisper a prayer. Your chastening was upon them, As the pregnant woman approaches the time to give birth, she writhes and cries out in her bechaveleha, in her labor pains, in her birth pangs. Chevle. This is plural feminine. Bechaveleha, in her birth pangs. Thus we were before you, Lord. We were pregnant. We writhed in labor. This is talking about the Jewish people in birth pangs. And why are they in birth pangs? Because they turned to the gods of the Gentiles. Not because they did Judaism, not because they rejected Christ and wouldn't bow their stubborn, stiff neck to Christ and turn away from their evil Jewish ways, because they turned away from Judaism to the ways of the Gentiles. And so that's why they're going into birth pangs. You need to think about that. It's a very, very important point for our day. And most people don't know this. Most people never give it a thought. Most Messianic Jews never think about this. That we're going to go through, Israel, not we, but Israel is going to go through birth pangs because they turn to the ways of the Gentiles and do Christmas and Easter and whatever else. Communion, and I don't know all the words. And believe in Christ. You know all the Christian things that I don't even know. All the words I can't even think of. But because of that, that's why Israel's going into birth pangs. You need to think about it. Matthew 24. This is the verse I told you that is misquoted, mistranslated, misunderstood. Then there will be a great tribulation period, such as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will again. Now what he says in Hebrew is, there will be a tzarot ravot. Like the modern translation of Hebrew gets it wrong. They put tzara gedolah, which is another way to say it, but it's wrong. It's not quoting the scripture in Deuteronomy. They just put tribulation great. Tzara gedolah. It's wrong. It should be tzarot ravot, quoting Deuteronomy. But there is no Hebrew translation of the New Testament. It doesn't exist. We don't have it. We only have it in Greek. Now, there might be one floating around in Hebrew, but nobody's ever found it. So they translated it the best they could. There will be a tzarot ravot, many troubles, distress, pressure, birth pangs, tribulation, such as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will be. It is because of this verse that people in the church say the title, The Great Tribulation. This is the verse from which they take that supposed title. It is not a title. It's adjectives. There will be tzarot ravot, great pressure, distress, birth pangs, such as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will again. It is a one-time deal. The birth pangs, it's going to be worse than anything this world has ever experienced, including the flood. That was just a picture of what's coming. Oh, and lest you get depressed, this is going to freak you out. In Matthew 24, where Yeshua says, Day of the Lord, 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 birth pangs, birth pangs, birth pangs, birth pangs, birth pangs, 120 times. Guess what he says at the end of it? And this Besorah, this good news that I just told you, will be spread throughout the earth. And then the Ketz, the day of the Lord, will come. This is the good news. This is the gospel. Talking about the birth pangs is the gospel. Because it's what it should, be talked about to turn the world to the Messiah. Not, let us all come together and hold hands, kumbaya, and be just precious before the Lord's sight. You need to know the birth pangs in the day of the Lord. There's more verses about the day of the Lord than anything in the Bible, including Yeshua. This is the gospel. Isaiah 66, before she was pained, she brought forth. Before her chevel, her birth pang came, she gave birth to a boy. If you don't recognize Revelation chapter 12 in that, you don't know Revelation. It should immediately make you think Revelation chapter 12. She, Israel, before her birth pangs came, she gave birth to a boy. That means it's quick. It happens very fast. Who has heard such a thing? Who's seen such things? Can a land be in pain in one day? What day? The day of the Lord, that day. Can a nation be brought forth all at once? As soon as Zion, Israel, Jerusalem was pained, she also brought forth her sons. Shall I bring to the point of birth and not give delivery? What am I going to do? Like just keep beating on you in birth pangs until you drop dead? No, it's going to be very fast, and you are going to be born again. Israel. Israel is going to be born again. God's going to make sure of it. Or should I, who gives delivery, shut the womb? Jeremiah 4:21 and 31. How long must I see the standard and hear the shofar? For I heard a cry as of a woman in Sarah, birth pangs, anguish as of one giving birth to her first child. The cry of the daughter of Zion, gasping for breath, stretching out her hands, saying, woe is me because I faint before murderers. Just picture a woman, and she's on the birthing stool, sitting up. That's how they used to do it. They didn't lay down, they would sit. Sitting on the birthing stool, and the midwives are gathered around her. She's screaming in pain, and there's some Gentiles at the door with knives, ready to kill the baby. That's what it's describing. Who's the woman? Israel. Who's the baby? That's the question. Who's the baby? Who does she give birth to? You should know, but we'll get to it. Jeremiah 6:22 through 24. Behold, a people is coming from the north, arrayed as a man. Arrayed means like dressed. Dressed as a man for battle against you, O daughter of Zion. We've heard I hear at least once a week, but only because I'm not on the internet very much anymore. I used to hear 5 times a week. Somebody saying, there are wars and rumors of wars right now. No, there are not. If you don't know who the rumor is said to, and when the rumor is said, you don't know what it's quoting. That's in Matthew 24, about wars and rumors of wars. Here's one of the verses it's quoting. Behold, a people is coming from the north, arrayed as a man for battle against you, O daughter of Zion. We have heard the rumor of it. Our hands hang limp. Sarah, tribulation, or birth pangs, has seized us. Pain like a woman in labor. This is not happening yet. There are no wars and rumors of wars. This hasn't even started. You get what I'm saying? Hasn't even come yet. There are specific wars, there are specific rumors. This is one of them. Jeremiah 50:41 through 43. Behold, the people is coming from the north. Hey, that sounds very familiar, doesn't it? Yeah. Jeremiah 6 says, behold, the people is coming from the north, dressed like a man for war. Wars and rumors of wars. Behold, the people is coming from the north. And it's a war. They seize bow and spear. They're cruel. They have no mercy. Arrayed as a man for war against you, O daughter of Babylon. Daughter of Babylon, not daughter of Zion. Did you see that? It's a different daughter, a different war, a different battle, a different place. But it's the same time period. The king of Babylon has heard the rumor. This is another rumor, a different rumor about them, and his hands hang limp. Sarah, distress has gripped him. Pangs, now this is the word chil. Chil, from chevle. Chil, like a woman in labor. So it has both words. It has tzara and it has chevle. And this is against who? Babylon. Yeah. Not Zion, Babylon. So it happens to Israel, but it also happens to Babylon. Hosea 13. Tribulations, tsarur. Say tsarur. I don't want you to say it because it's hard to say. Tsarur. Tsarur. Tribulations of iniquity of Ephraim. His sin is stored up. Birth pangs, chevle. This is literally the word chevle. And it's the only time in the Bible it's used like this. There's no variation in it. It's just the word chevle. Chevle HaMashiach. Birth pangs of Messiah. Chevle of childbirth come upon him, Ephraim, Israel. He is not a wise son, for it is not the time for him to delay at the opening of the womb. At the opening of what? It's not time to wait at the opening of the womb. What does that mean? That means he is giving birth on the birth stool, and God says, "Don't stop. Don't stop. Keep giving birth. It's about to come. Go. Don't stop." Because there's murderers at the door, ready to kill the baby and her. So she wants to stop and run. And he says, "Don't stop. Give birth to that baby. Do teshuvah." It's not time to stop. It's time to go. Matthew 24. You will be hearing of wars and rumors of battles. We got at least two. One to Israel, one to Babylon. And guess what? There's more. There's three more that I know of. To Ammon, Edom, and Moab. Those are the only ones I know of. There might be more. But there's at least five. Right. There's at least five rumors of wars. There's no wars and rumors of wars in the earth now. It's not happening. It's talking about the day of the Lord. You will be hearing of wars and rumors of battles. See that you are not frightened. Nation will rise against nation, and in various places there will be famines and earthquakes. There are no famines and earthquakes right now. That's not happening. Not yet. This is in the day of the Lord. This is, what do they call it? Braxton Hicks contractions. False labor. Just a taste. This is nothing. Nothing compared to what's coming in the birth pangs. There will be famines and earthquakes, but all these things, the wars, the rumors of the wars, the nation rising up against nation, the famines, the earthquakes, those are in the beginning, the first part of HaChavelim, the birth pangs. Make sense? Yep. 1 Thessalonians 5. Now as to the times and epochs, brothers, I have no need to write anything to you. Why? Why does Shaul have no need to write to the Thessalonians about times and epochs? Now what we're told in the church is that no man knows the day or the hour. That's why they have no need for me to write anything to you. Because why? No man knows the day or the hour. Just the opposite. And he says, you're right, he says, you already know. And then he says, the day of the Lord. Now as to the times and epochs, brothers, I have no need to write to you anything, because you yourselves know full well, you already know, that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. I hate to do Lashon Hara and talk about anybody. But I have to say this guy's name I have to, so that you understand. Back in the 70s and 80s, back then, when Messianic Judaism was really just starting, there was a Messianic Jew in Dallas named Emil Zola. He was one of the first, and he taught and he taught and he taught and he taught. He taught a lot of great stuff, but he didn't teach much Jewish stuff. And he taught, and he wrote a musical, and he wrote many songs beside the musical, and many books called The Beloved Thief. The Beloved Thief. And what his premise was, is what the whole church's premise is, as a whole, just broadly speaking, that Jesus comes like a beloved thief to snatch us away in the night. And he talked about the Jewish rituals of getting a bride and all this, and he called it the beloved thief. It is absolutely wrong. That's all I can say. It's just wrong. You know, Emil Zola did a lot of amazing things for the body, but this was bad. Don't be taken in by it. If you hear the phrase from anybody that Jesus is a beloved thief, this is evil. It is exactly the opposite of what is said here. You yourselves know full well, I don't have to write and talk to you about anything about this, because you know that what will come like a thief?
The day of the Lord.
The day of the Lord, not the Lord.
Right.
The day of the Lord. How long is the day of the Lord?
7 years. Forever.
How long is the day of the Lord? 1,000 years. Right, 1,000 years. And the birth pangs, which started, last 7 years. And he says that will come. And then he says even more about how you shouldn't be taken in by this, because he says, and it doesn't come to you like a thief.
Right.
It comes to them like a thief. What's going to come like a thief?
The day.
The day of the Lord will come just like a thief in the night, while they are saying shalom and safety. Then sudden destruction will come upon them, not you. You're already going to go in the resurrection. But it will come on them who don't know God, who don't know the Messiah, like birth pangs. Kechevle, like birth pangs. Upon a woman with child. Now, how did they know this stuff in the first century? In Thessalonica, in the middle of Greece. It's in the Tanakh, right. And the Gentiles went to the synagogue and they learned. And Shaul taught them all the Jewish stuff too. They knew. These are Gentiles primarily. And they knew. Like birth pangs upon a woman with child, and they will not, they. Not us, not you. There's no beloved thief. Will not escape. But, now he makes a contrast. But you, brothers, just the opposite. But you, brothers, are not in darkness, that the day should overtake you like a thief. He comes right out and says, it is not going to come to us like a thief. You won't be surprised. It's not coming like a thief. We aren't even going to be here. We're taken in the resurrection. But we're going to know when that happens too. We know. That's the point that is told over and over in the New Testament. We know. Not we don't know. There's no such phrase. I guess I have to say this right now. I can't go into it right now, but I'll say as much as I can just to bring some clarity. There is no such phrase in the Bible. It is a misquote, a mistranslation, bad English. It's just simply bad English. There's no such phrase as no man knows the day or the hour. It does not exist. That phrase doesn't even exist in the Bible. It says something completely different that I can't go into right now because there's no time. But at least you should be able to see that he says here, you know. They don't know, so they're going to get the birth pangs. like a thief in the night. Many troubles and evils, ra'ot, rabot, v'tzarot. Now, you should have recognized Revelation 12 by now. A great sign appeared in heaven. That means I saw a picture in heaven. John saw a picture in heaven. He saw a vision in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown with 12 stars. Who is this?
Israel.
Who is this?
Israel.
How do you know it's Israel?
The 12 stars.
Good. The 12 stars of the 12 tribes. What about the sun and the moon? Very good. Because of Joseph's dream. Remember, Joseph had a dream of 11 stars, and he translated that as his brothers, and the sun and the moon that all bowed down to him. What was the sun and the moon in the vision? His parents, right. Who were his parents? Jacob, Rachel. Jacob and Rachel. Because remember, his mom was Rachel. His mom was Rachel. So, Jacob, Rachel, and the 12 brothers. That's the crown on her head. So who is she? She's clothed the sun and the moon, Jacob and Rachel, and she's got on her head the 12 tribes. Who is she?
Israel.
She's Israel. And she was with child. She's with child. She's pregnant. And she cried out, being in birth pangs and in distress. 2 words. Birth pangs and distress. Uchavleha, in birth pangs. Uvtsiri, and in distress, or in birth pangs. Both words are used here in the Hebrew. Uvchavaleha, in her birth pangs. Uvtsiri, and her distress, to give birth. And another sign appeared. Now you know what's quoted here in Revelation chapter 12. You've seen what's being quoted, yes?
Yeah.
In Isaiah and Jeremiah and Hosea and Micah. Remember those?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay, good. So, she's in distress to give birth. And another picture appeared in heaven. A huge red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 crowns. And the dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth. She's on the birthing stool. She's about to give birth. She wants to give up. God says, don't give up. It's not time to give up. Push, push. So that when she gave birth, he might eat up the child. That's the murderers that she's sitting in front of. And she gave birth to a son, a male, who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. Who does she give birth to?
Yeah.
Messiah. That's the Jews being born again. So for 3.5 years, from the year 6001 at Rosh Hashanah, 3.5 years later, they're in birth pangs and they finally give birth. They're all born again. And then in Revelation 13, it says what happens right after that baby's born. They flee for the wilderness. Yes?
Usually, iron is not good. So why with a lot of iron?
I can't do that right now, but that is a very good question and I want to get it on tape. The question is, Messiah is going to rule the world with a rod of iron? Iron's not good. Who's iron in the 4 nations that attack Israel and destroy Israel? Who's iron? Gold, silver, bronze, iron. Who's iron? Rome. Rome. Messiah is going to rule the world with Rome? With a rod of Rome? Yes. That's for another time. Okay, good question though. 1 Thessalonians Chapter 4. Let's look at this whole thing now. It should absolutely make sense to you what's going on here. Look at the red words in our passage in Deuteronomy. My anger will rage against them bayom hahu. They will say, bayom hahu. Many evils and tribulation will befall them, and they will say, bayom hahu. Is it not because our God is no longer in my midst that these evils fell on me? And I will hide my face by Yom Hahu because of all the evil, because they turned to the God of the Gentiles. I know that after my death, Moses says, you will become corrupted so that evil will befall you at the end of days. Ketz Yamim, end of days. Because you did evil to provoke him to anger through the work of your hands. Now, 1 Thessalonians, we're going to end with this. Now it should make perfect sense what's going on here. And if you're confused by this, I would suggest you go back and listen to this teaching. It's on the YouTube, on the Tzion channel. All you have to do is push on videos, and they come up in order. Just look for the date. But we do not want you to be ignorant, brothers, about those who are asleep, so that you will not grieve as the rest who have no hope. God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep. Well, how does he bring the ones who fell asleep with Yeshua back to earth? Because they already went in the resurrection. Yes, they were already in heaven during the birth pangs. Birth pangs and the wedding go on concurrently. So at the end of those 7 years, he's going to bring them back with him. God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep in Yeshua. We who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord will not go before those who fell asleep. In other words, the ones who fell asleep, the dead, rise first, and then those who are alive. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout. Now the shout, a lot of people ask me, what's the shout? What are the words? Very simple. Kumi! That's it. Kumi! Get up! Arise. It can be translated arise, get up, or awake. Or wake up. Kumi. From the voice of the angel and with the shofar of God, and the dead in Messiah will rise first. Then we who are alive will remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. So all the righteous go, the living after the dead. The dead go first. Immediately the living go in the resurrection of the dead. What date does the resurrection happen on? On Rosh Hashanah. Right, Tishri 1. So that takes place. And then he says, and so we'll always be with the Lord. So comfort each other with these words. Now, as to the times and epochs, brothers, I have no need to write to you anything. Now, does that make sense why that's there? Yeah. He just talked about the resurrection and the order of the resurrection, how it happens, when it happens, and then he just goes on to talk about the day of the Lord. For you yourselves know full well that the day of the Lord will come just like a thief in the night, while they are saying peace and safety, then sudden destruction will come upon them like birth pangs on a woman with child, and they will not escape. But you, brothers, are not in darkness, that the day should overtake you like a thief, for you are all sons of light and sons of day. That's the comfort. That's the gospel, the good news about the birth pangs and the day of the Lord and the horrors. That's the gospel. So what I'm saying is that for millennia, for 2,000 years almost, the body of Messiah has avoided the day of the Lord because it just sounds so ugly. But the truth is, that's the gospel. He starts out by saying, look, I don't want you to be ignorant about this stuff. Comfort each other with these things. Comfort each other about the resurrection, about the birth pangs. That's why it's in the Bible, so we can know God. It's not to scare you. It's to give you understanding of what's coming. Deep, clear, precise understanding, so that it's not fuzzy and hazy, and you're like, well, I know something bad's coming, but, thank God I'll be taken in the rapture. That's not the gospel. The gospel is precise and clean and clear and crisp. So you need to learn the doctrines of the festivals that tell us exactly what's going to happen. That's why this stuff is in the Bible. And by the way, we looked at 1/8 of the verses that we could have looked at. 1/8. Just because I'm nice. I didn't want it to go on too long. But even just 1/8 gives such an amazingly clear story of what's going to happen. So do you see how important the birth pangs are? Yes?
Yeah.
Do you see how important the birth pangs are for you? Yeah? Huh. Well, I hope you do. I can't tell, but I hope you do. Because you need to do your own study on your own. And I'd just like to plug my book right now. I just sold the last copy, so I have to print more. But my book, when all the pictures are restored, it's on my website, michaelwasherart.com. On the writings, my writings page. When all the pictures are restored, the chapter on Rosh Hashanah lays the themes of Rosh Hashanah out in perfect order and has all the scriptures about each theme. And it has everything about the birth pangs that I didn't say today. So if you get a chance, you can order that book, and that'll help a lot.
Does it address Eileen's question about the iron rod?
What is the question about the iron rod, God reigning with an iron rod? That is answered in the Hanukkah chapter. Okay, so that's all I could come up with to where you still stay awake. So let's stand.
Yeah.
For the Aleinu and say, Bayom Hahu. Bayom Hahu, in that day. Come on, let's stand for the Aleinu. Aleinu לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורר עלינו ככל המונם. Let us adore the Lord of all, who in greatness created the world from of old, that he has not made us like the nations of the earth, not made us like the families of the land. He has not made our destiny like theirs, or cast our lot with all of them. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu hidei Adonai echad u'shemo echad. And it is said, the Lord shall be king over all the earth in that day. The Lord shall be one, and his name one. I'm laughing because I just heard, Bayom hahu, Hevlei HaMashiach, Hevlei HaMashiach, Yeh Adonai Echad. Yay, birth pangs. Together. Va'anachnu korim, Umishtachavim umodim lifnei melech malachei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. And we bend the knee and bow in worship and give thanks to the King of Kings, the Holy One. Blessed is he. We acknowledge before the King of Kings that there is none like him. There is nothing but him, as Torah says. Know that the Lord, he is God in the heavens above and on earth beneath. Ein od. There's nothing else but God. Shabbat shalom.